The steam from the coffee rose in slow spirals, as if dancing to the rhythm of an invisible song. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Harbor and Steam, painting the counter in shades of gold. Samantha moved between tables and hurried laughter, balancing trays as if she were carrying her own destiny in her hands. It was the same scene as always, yet that day, perhaps because of the light, or perhaps because of her, something felt different in the air. A quiet promise hidden in the silence. She liked to observe. Every customer seemed to bring a fragment of the world she longed to see. The executive reading reports on his phone, the student lost in thought, the elderly man who ordered the same cappuccino every morning. Samantha watched them and imagined their stories. That was how she escaped, by building lives with her gaze, while her own stayed locked in the same rhythm between greetings and goodbyes. During her break, she would lean against the window with her cup of black coffee, watching the skyscrapers reflect the San Francisco sky. Outside, the city rushed on. Inside, she simply breathed. The aroma of coffee kept her grounded, a reminder that even in repetition, there was still beauty. There was still love in every small gesture, in the way she arranged the tables, in the patience with which she listened, in the quiet tenderness she spread without even realizing it. At night, silence was her refuge. She would sit before the mirror, her hands tracing invisible words in the air. ASL, sign language. Every movement carried memories of her mother, the gentle touch of her fingers, the music that lived through emotions instead of sound. Sometimes Samantha smiled, other times tears came without warning. But in both, there was the same desire: to be understood, to be heard, even when she said nothing at all. The treble clef pendant hung over her chest, cold against her skin. It was both her anchor and her wound. Every time she touched it, she remembered the sound of the piano, the afternoons when her mother played even though she couldn't hear. And maybe that's why Samantha never stopped listening to the world, even when the world didn't seem to listen back. There was something in her that refused to give up, a stubborn flame that would not go out. But life, even in its repetitions, always keeps a detour hidden. Between one delivery and the next, Samantha noticed something in the reservation book. A name, a small, almost insignificant detail. J. Reeves, 12:30 p.m. She read it silently, the sound of the name echoing in her mind. She didn't know why, but something about it stirred her curiosity, a faint echo, like the prelude of a song. And then the clock struck 12:30. Samantha straightened her apron, took a deep breath, and looked toward the door. The bell hadn't rung yet, but her heart already heard its sound. It was the kind of moment one can't explain, only feel. The kind of moment that changes everything, even before it begins. The doorbell chimed softly, almost timidly. Samantha looked up and saw a tall man in a gray suit, his expression restrained, walking in beside a woman with silver hair and a gentle smile. There was something serene about her presence, a rare calm amid the clinking of cutlery and the low murmur of conversations. But it was the silence that surrounded her, a silence full of meaning, of words that didn't need to be spoken. The staff exchanged uncertain glances. The woman smiled, signing gracefully, but no one understood. The discomfort hung in the air like a thin mist. Then Samantha stepped forward. Her hands moved delicately, forming signs she knew by heart, familiar, almost sacred. "Welcome. What would you like to order?" The woman's face lit up, and for a moment, the entire cafe seemed to stop. Jason watched, surprised. He was used to solving problems with logic and precision, but there, in front of that young woman with a simple apron and an honest gaze, he felt something different. A lump formed in his throat, a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity. He watched his mother laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in a long while. And that laughter broke through something inside him, shattering a wall he hadn't known was there. As Samantha wrote down the order, her eyes met Jason's. It was brief, almost accidental, yet enough to send a quiet warmth through her hands. There was something in his gaze, a blend of distance and tenderness, like someone who sees the world from above and suddenly remembers what it means to be human. She looked away, trying to hide the flush in her cheeks, but the spark had already been lit. During their meal, Jason tried to focus on words, yet found himself lost in the pauses. The way Samantha arranged the table, the tilt of her head as she listened, the care she gave to each of her mother's gestures, it all felt choreographed by some invisible feeling. He didn't know what to call it, not yet, but he felt an unexpected urge to understand who this woman was, the one who could communicate so much without saying almost anything. When they finished their coffee, Carmen touched her son's arm and signed something. Jason interpreted, "Come back here, there's kindness in this place." He smiled, and, without really knowing why, he promised he would. Samantha watched from afar, her heart beating faster. There was something in that moment that made her believe life might be about to change, even if quietly, like a chord that comes just before the melody begins. The door closed, and the bell chimed again. Samantha stood still for a moment, holding the empty tray, the name Reeves echoing in her mind. Outside, the wind blew. Inside, something within her stirred. And though the world went on at its usual hurried pace, her heart was beating to a different rhythm, the rhythm of what was yet to come. In the days that followed, the name J. Reeves began to reappear on the reservation list, like a steady note in a familiar song, always at the same time, always the same order. But what caught Samantha's attention wasn't the coffee, it was the look. Jason watched her with a quiet curiosity, as if trying to decipher an ancient language. And the more she tried to understand the reason for his constant visits, the more she realized that something inside her was changing too. Carmen, meanwhile, had become a familiar presence. She greeted Samantha in ASL, her smiles saying more than words ever could. The cafe, once filled only with noise and haste, now seemed to move to a new rhythm, the rhythm of hands that speak and eyes that listen. There was tenderness in that routine, a kind of love that didn't yet have a name, but was already taking shape. One afternoon, Jason waited until the rush quieted down. As Samantha wiped the counter, he approached. "You use sign language so naturally. Did you learn it because of someone special?" he asked softly, almost hesitant. She paused before answering, her fingers brushing the treble clef pendant at her neck. "My mother. She was a pianist, lost part of her hearing. I guess I learned so we could keep talking." The silence that followed was thick but beautiful, as if for a moment they had both forgotten the noise of the world. Jason leaned slightly against the counter. "At my company, we're developing a project on digital accessibility. And honestly, we've been missing what really matters, truly understanding the people we're designing for." He hesitated, then added, "Would you help me? Just offer a human perspective, so to speak?" The question caught Samantha off guard. She almost dropped her cup. Help a tech executive? She, a cafe waitress? Over the next few days, doubt became her constant companion. Kylie, her coworker, didn't make things easier with her teasing tone. "He only shows up when you're on shift, Sam. If that's not fate, it's an algorithm." She laughed, half amused, half uneasy, torn between the chance to do something meaningful and the fear of not being enough. Her heart wavered, between dream and caution, between desire and fear. In the end, she said yes, not out of ambition, but curiosity. She wanted to understand what he saw in her, why he seemed to believe so deeply in something she wasn't sure she even had. And when she arrived at the company for the first time, her badge hanging around her neck, a mix of nerves and hope stirring in her chest, she realized this was the beginning of something bigger, not just a new job, but a new chapter of herself. Jason greeted her with a discreet smile, the kind that says, "I'm glad you came," without saying a word. Outside, sunlight reflected off the glass buildings. Inside, two lives began to align, like lines of code about to form something they couldn't yet decipher, but already felt deeply. The glass walls of the office mirrored the gray San Francisco sky, and inside, between lines of code and spreadsheets, Samantha felt as if she were in another world. Hours drifted by slowly, carried by the steady rhythm of keyboards and Jason's calm voice explaining concepts she was still trying to grasp. But what captured her attention most wasn't the data, it was the pauses. His pauses, those few seconds when his gaze wandered from the screen and met hers, as if in that fleeting instant, everything else ceased to exist. Over time, work turned into something more personal. Long meetings stretched into quiet conversations, shared memories, and unspoken confessions. Samantha told him about her mother and the cafe. Jason spoke of the weight of expectations and the constant fear of letting people down. He always seemed to be searching for something, perhaps peace, perhaps someone who could truly see him beyond his success. And she did see him, truly. Not the man from business magazines, but the human being hidden behind reports and goals. One evening, the building was empty except for the two of them. The soft glow of the monitor lit Jason's face, and Samantha, distracted, caught their reflection in the window. The contrast was almost poetic. Him, composed and restrained. Her, with a gaze that revealed more than she intended. An accidental touch, their hands brushing over the keyboard, broke the silence. It was brief, but enough to set the air ablaze between them. Time seemed to stop. She felt her body react, warmth rising, heartbeat faltering, breath catching. Jason pulled back slightly, but his eyes lingered. There were no words, only that subtle electric tension that comes just before the inevitable. A quiet yearning, like a song on the verge of breaking through the silence. But destiny rarely allows for calm. The next morning, Brian, the project director, walked in with a crooked grin. "So we've got a new consultant, or is she just the boss's distraction?" he teased. Jason's expression didn't change, but Samantha felt her face flush. The comment, though said in jest, left something heavier in the air, a judgment she didn't know how to confront. In the days that followed, the atmosphere shifted. She tried to stay focused, but every exchanged glance seemed to carry new weight. Jason, meanwhile, wrestled between maintaining professional distance and giving in to the pull that drew him closer. There was an invisible wall between them, built from rules, appearances, and the fear of what they might lose if they crossed the line. One night, as she left the office, Jason caught up with her in the elevator. He didn't say a word, just offered her a ride. The drive was quiet, the radio playing softly, the wind toying with her hair. When the car crossed the bridge, he changed course. "I need to show you something," he murmured. And there, before the golden gate, glowing like a promise against the horizon, Samantha realized that some voices don't need to be heard to be understood. The wind blew hard, carrying the scent of the sea and the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. The golden gate shimmered beneath the orange glow of sunset, as if the sky itself were burning. Samantha stepped out of the car in silence, her heart racing, unsure of what Jason wanted to show her. But when she saw him standing there before the vast horizon, she understood. It wasn't about a place, it was about a moment. Jason kept his eyes fixed on the distance. His hands were in his pockets, his expression calm, yet there was something in his posture, a slight slant, a weariness that wasn't physical. "I come here when the noise inside gets too loud," he said, referring to the corporate world, to the weight of the endless decisions. "Here, I remember who I was before all of this." Samantha moved closer, feeling the sincerity in his voice. It was the first time she'd seen him without his armor. For a while, neither of them spoke, only the wind did. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they couldn't say. Samantha felt the urge to touch his arm, but held herself back. Jason turned slowly, and the look he gave her didn't ask for permission. It asked for understanding. It was the kind of look that recognizes another soul without words, that finds an echo even in what remains unspoken. "You remind me what's real," he confessed softly, almost a whisper. The words fell between them like a dangerous confession. Samantha tried to respond, but her voice failed her. Tears welled up, and a deep fear of believing that this could be more than just a fleeting moment. Yet when Jason stepped closer, she didn't move away. The space between them disappeared. The wind seemed to still. The bridge lights shimmered in his eyes as Jason's hand found hers. The touch was gentle, hesitant, but honest. A touch that said, "I know what I feel, even if the world won't understand." Their first kiss came slowly, with reverence and trembling. There was no rush, only a quiet surrender, two hearts finding each other somewhere between reason and the impossible. When they pulled apart, both knew something had changed. Jason looked away, battling his own desire and everything their closeness could destroy. "This shouldn't be happening," he murmured. "Maybe not," Samantha breathed, "but it is." Her words weren't defiant. They carried the calm strength of someone who understands the power of what she feels. They stayed there for a few more minutes, side by side, without touching again. The sea kept roaring below, indifferent to human choices. And beneath the golden bridge, a love began, not as a sudden fire, but as a flame that refused to go out. The days that followed were a minefield. Samantha woke up with the salty taste of the wind still lingering on her lips, Jason's touch burning on her skin, both a memory and a warning. At the office, the air felt heavier, thick with glances and unspoken words. Every time he walked into the room, her heartbeat faltered. And yet between them, there was nothing but silence. Jason had retreated into himself. His professional facade was flawless. Calm voice, measured tone, precise movements, but his eyes betrayed him. There was something contained there, a fire struggling to survive beneath the ice. With every meeting, Samantha felt the chasm widen between what they lived and what they pretended to be. And that pretense was suffocating her. One afternoon, during a project presentation, Brian made another cutting remark. Something about certain consultants who deliver more than just numbers. The room laughed, and Samantha's stomach twisted. Jason ended the meeting abruptly, his expression cold and sharp. But afterward he said nothing, No apology, no reassurance, just distance. That night she returned to Harbor and Steam, seeking shelter in the simple routine she loved so deeply. The smell of freshly baked bread, the whistle of the kettle, it all felt more real than the days she spent pretending to be someone else. Meanwhile, Jason stood by the window of his sleek, silent apartment, staring at the ocean. The success, the accolades, the wealth, none of it felt enough. He thought of Samantha, of how she made him feel human again, and of the fear that everything he had built could collapse if he gave in once more. There are lines that must never be crossed, he had told himself countless times. But the heart rarely listens to reason. Days later, Samantha decided to write a letter. Not to send it, just to release what she could no longer contain. If love is wrong, then why does it feel so right when I'm with you? Why does the world insist on making us choose between feeling and surviving? Her hands trembled as she folded the paper. It was there, in those unsent words, that she hid the truest part of herself. And so, what had been born beneath the golden bridge began to turn into a secret that lived, pulsing, quiet, and alive among spreadsheets, meetings, and sidelong glances. The love that once brought light now moved through shadows, not for lack of feeling, but out of fear of being seen. Time passed like a winter that refused to end. Mornings stretched endlessly, and Samantha's coffee had lost its flavor. She arrived at the office before anyone else, as if silence could shield her from the questions she didn't even know how to answer. Jason, in turn, avoided crossing paths with her in the hallways. Love, or what remained of it, had turned into a poorly healed wound. Meetings became cold rituals. Every word was measured, every glance a threat. The tension between them was so obvious that even their colleagues began to notice. Brian, in particular, seemed to thrive on the distance. He made a point of provoking and insinuating, and Jason, once so steadfast, limited himself to taking deep breaths and moving on, as if a single word could open an even greater chasm. Samantha tried to hide her exhaustion, but her body betrayed her. She slept little, ate poorly. Sometimes she found herself staring at her phone, waiting for a message that never came. And when she finally accepted that he wouldn't reach out, a solitary tear would slip. Not just from longing, but from the absence of courage on both sides. Love needed a voice, but silence had won. One night at Harbor and Steam, a customer left a book forgotten on the table. Love in the Time of Cholera. Samantha smiled wryly. She flipped through the pages and paused at a passage underlined. It was inevitable. The scent of bitter almonds always reminded him of the fate of thwarted loves. She closed the book slowly, as if recognizing her own story reflected in another life. Across the city, Jason tried to convince himself that work was enough, but the days felt colorless. The sounds of the streets, the roar of the sea, even the clinking of glasses at home, everything seemed distant. He had built walls to protect his reputation, but inside them nothing remained but echo. Yet destiny has a strange way of bringing together what tries to drift apart. One morning, unexpected news crossed both their paths. A tragedy had struck one of the city's shipyards, and part of the consulting team would be transferred to assist with the reconstruction project. Samantha was among those chosen, and Jason, as the responsible director, would have to lead the operation personally. The moment she received the email, her heart raced. Years of restraint collapsed in seconds. It was as if the universe had decided that the silence had lasted long enough. And behind the fear, something stronger stirred, an old, latent longing ready to awaken once more. San Francisco felt different when Samantha returned. The wind from the bay carried a familiar chill, but the streets sounded calmer, as if time had learned to respect her silence. As she stepped out of the taxi, she saw the newly inaugurated foundation building. In the mirrored glass of the facade, the reflection of the Golden Gate shimmered, and for a moment she felt the same shiver from their first meeting, the one in which destiny had only whispered, promising nothing. Inside, everything radiated purpose. Panels with braille captions, tablets with voice readers, and ASL interpreters on every floor. Accessibility wasn't just a concept, it was life pulsing through the details. And at the center of the lobby, a name engraved in metal: the Porter Foundation for Digital Access. Samantha's hands trembled. Jason had named the project after her. Jason watched from a distance, not approaching. He leaned against a column, his gaze steady but hesitant. The dark suit contrasted with the vulnerability in his expression. Since the day she had left, he had learned to listen differently, not with his ears, but with absence. Every completed project, every sleepless night, carried the memory of a woman who taught him that love doesn't need noise to be real. When their eyes finally met, time seemed to stop. No words were spoken, only the silent acknowledgement that they had both changed, yet something essential remained the same. Samantha touched her mother's pendant, as she always did when her heart threatened to overflow. Jason gave a small, gentle smile, and that alone was enough to melt the months of ice between them. He approached slowly. Each step echoed through the empty lobby, heavier than the last. When he stopped in front of her, he signed an ASL. "You're back." Samantha responded with a soft, watery smile. "I was never really gone." Their hands met, tentative but firm, as if reaffirming an old promise, one that time had only tested. Carmen appeared shortly after, watching from a distance with her usual serene glow. For her, this reunion was more than the coming together of two hearts. It was a reconciliation of worlds, of words and gestures, sound and silence. She approached briefly, signed something to Samantha. "Thank you for bringing him back," and left smiling. Samantha and Jason stayed there, side by side, unhurried. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue across the glass of the foundation. The reflection of the sea shimmered in the windows, and the wind carried the same gentle sound from when it all began. It was the sound of hope, the sound of love finding its own voice once again. The late afternoon spilled over the bay like a golden veil. The wind carried the scent of the sea and the distant echo of a boat's bells. Samantha and Jason walked along the waterfront, side by side, without the need to fill the air with words. There was something deeper in that silence, something that didn't demand explanations, only presence. They stopped before the Golden Gate, where it had all begun. The sun slowly sank behind the hills, and the bridge's reflection painted the water in shades of orange. Jason looked at Samantha, and for the first time in a long while, he seemed at peace. There was no longer the weight of what could have been, only the acknowledgement of what was, simple, complete, and real. Samantha held her mother's pendant up to the light. The metal caught the sunset, like a small flame dancing between her fingers. She smiled. She remembered the woman who had taught her to hear the world even when all sound fell silent. And in that moment, she understood that true love isn't measured by the noise it makes, but by the peace it leaves behind. Jason signed slowly, "You taught me to listen differently." She responded with tenderness, "And you taught me to believe in what isn't said." Neither of them tried to turn the moment into a promise. They knew that love, when true, needs no contracts, only surrender. The wind picked up, making Samantha's hair dance. Jason stepped closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. The world continued around them. The distant city sounds, waves breaking against the rocks, the hum of a new beginning. Everything seemed in perfect harmony, like a symphony without a conductor. When the sun finally disappeared, Samantha closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Inside her, there was no more fear, no more doubt, only gratitude. Jason watched her for a moment and with a gentle gesture signed, "I'm here." She responded with nothing more than a smile, that same quiet smile that once had changed both of their destinies. The sound of the wind was the final voice of the scene, the same sound that had echoed on their first day at the cafe. But now it no longer represented loneliness. It was the sound of life, of love that had grown mature without needing explanation. And as night fell over the city, San Francisco breathed in silence, keeping for itself the story of two hearts that had learned to love beyond sound. In the silence that lingered between them, something new was born, not the absence of sound, but the presence of understanding. Samantha learned that to love isn't to give up on oneself, but to find the balance between what you dream and what you share. Jason discovered that true love doesn't demand perfection, only truth. Time, which had once seemed an enemy, became an ally. They both realized that some reunions don't need applause. A look, a gesture, and the certainty that when love is real, it always finds its home, even after countless detours. And in this moment, the story becomes a mirror. Because in some way, we've all been Samantha, trying to hear the heart amidst the noise of the world. And we've all been Jason, learning that opening your chest is harder than any achievement. Stories like this remind us that love doesn't need to be perfect to be real. It only needs to be felt, even when it can't be heard, even when silence speaks louder than 1,000 promises. If this story touched you, write in the comments, "Love transforms lives." And let this message spread, because the world needs more love that listens, waits, and heals. Subscribe to Eternal Romance Stories and experience, with every episode, emotions that warm the soul and reflections that transform the heart. Because this was just one of many stories that will continue to move you here.